Centipede Susie, Scott McGregor. Susie Becker. I saw those 2 words engraved on the tombstone. 2 words that have haunted me since I was 17 years old. Memories I wished were forgotten returned to me, and on the day of my mother's funeral, no less. 20 years have passed, and I stand over the grave of the infamous Susie Becker. Sometimes while I'm at home, my new home in Virginia, far away from here, I Google search the Yarhelm news and search for another incident. No dreadful reports ever appear, thank God. But despite years of silence, Yarhelm continued to terrify me. When I received the call about my mother's passing, my father asked me to come for the funeral, and as reluctant as I initially was, I returned home for the first time in 2 decades. Most people know me as the type not to scare easy. Practically all the typical phobias like needles, spiders, and clowns didn't faze me. In fact, I show disrespect toward those who quiver at such harmless and superficial nuances. People assume I'm fearless, yet I was frightened the moment I stepped back into my hometown Yarhelm. Frightened by that slimy and deformed monstrosity, and by the surge of carnage she brought 20 years ago. The carnage of Centipede Susie. Is this her? The voice which asked such a simple but daunting question belonged to my husband, Everett. I nodded, unable to let the word yes flow out of my mouth. Even seeing her name tightened my muscles and curled my stomach. They're wondering where you wandered off to, Molly. Over my shoulder, I looked back to the crowd gathered around my mother's tombstone, far across the field. I knew I shouldn't have sauntered away from the service, but the irresistible urge to behold the grave of the girl who plagued my dreams overwhelmed me. The idea that my mother's resting place shared the same grounds with the monster's memorial sickened me. We should go back, Everett said. I obliged, leaning my head into his shoulder as the gentle wind blew over the graveyard. The day was somber, bright autumn with yellow crumbled leaves scattered. A walk back to my mother's service eased my nerves. A steady stroll before we rejoined the crowd of distant family and friends, with painted anguish all over their faces. We can leave tonight, if you want, he suggested. The idea tempted me, but the guilty voice buried in my subconscious told me to stay a couple of days with my father. Considering this was the first time I've seen him since 1999, I could do that much at least. I have business here, I told Everett. Unbeknownst to Everett, my purpose was not with honoring my mother, but with the little girl whose memory stalked me. In Yarhelm, Centipede Susie's slaughter started on May 25th, 1999. The hottest spring in decades overtook that day, cloudless with a bright blue sky, and the stench of sweat reeked throughout the town. A forecast of 108 degrees created Yarhelm's first heat wave, and practically everyone in a 2-mile radius paid a visit to Johnny Parhar's ice cream shack. I couldn't say how many scoops must have been sold. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Kids scampered the streets with playful frolic, and hot young couples spread their intimacy in the far corners of the town.